The Eiffel Tower is rotting. Venice is drowning. And the Great Barrier Reef is rapidly turning into an underwater graveyard. Right now, 5 of the most iconic landmarks on the planet are on a terminal countdown to total disappearance. And we aren't talking about centuries, but the next 10 years. We've always treated these wonders as permanent, but the latest climate data proves they are anything but. If you don't visit them now, your children will only ever see them in history books. But which of these eternal treasures is currently facing a structural death spiral that engineers are terrified to admit? The answer is far more urgent than you've been led to believe. We like to believe that the world's greatest landmarks are eternal, monuments of stone and steel meant to stand long after we're gone. But the data tells a much darker story. Right now, as you watch this, the clock is ticking on Earth's most iconic treasures. From the romantic streets of Venice literally drowning beneath the lagoon, to the very iron of the Eiffel Tower being eaten alive by a silent, structural enemy. Today, we are analyzing 5 world wonders facing a terminal diagnosis. This isn't a distant, someday, threat, it is a physical reality occurring in real time. If we don't understand the science and the engineering behind these crises now, these breathtaking locations will vanish within our lifetime. This is the race to save the irreplaceable. We've spent centuries treating these landmarks as the sturdy anchors of our civilization, monuments that would outlast our empires and our names. But that sense of permanence is a lethal illusion. Think about the Great Barrier Reef. It's not just a park, it's the only living structure on Earth visible from space, and it's dying in a heartbeat. When we lose these places, we don't just lose a photo opportunity. We lose the biological and structural foundations of our planet. For the Eiffel Tower, the threat isn't a sudden collapse, it's a death by 1,000 cuts through microscopic rust that's been ignored for decades. We are the first generation in human history to possess the high-definition tools to document our own heritage as it disintegrates in real time. This isn't just about nature anymore. It's about the physical reality of a world that is literally breaking apart under our feet. We've been led to believe that international committees and billion-dollar restoration projects have everything under control. We've been told that science has a plan to hold back the tide in Venice and patch the holes in the reef. But here is the uncomfortable truth that the tourism boards and government agencies don't want you to know. In several of these cases, the very technology we are using to preserve these wonders is actually triggering a chemical and structural chain reaction that is accelerating their final collapse. Every time you look at a map, you are looking at a lie. The boundaries of our world are shrinking in real time, and we are psychologically wired to ignore it until the ground literally disappears from beneath us. We've spent decades treating the Great Barrier Reef or the snows of Kilimanjaro as luxury items, optional extras in the human experience. But these aren't just travel destinations, they are the canaries in the coal mine for the entire global climate system. If the world's largest living structure can vanish in a decade, it's a signal that the biological safety net for the entire planet is unraveling. This isn't just about losing a vacation spot, it's about a fundamental shift in the habitability of Earth. We've been conditioned to believe in the hero architect myth, the idea that we can simply out-engineer any crisis. We see the billion-dollar Meuse flood barriers in Venice or the constant, rhythmic repainting of the Eiffel Tower, and we breathe a sigh of relief. We tell ourselves that as long as we keep throwing money, steel, and high-tech sensors at the problem, we can preserve the status quo forever. We trust the institutions to hold the line, assuming that preservation means safety. But here is the reality that is starting to leak out from behind closed doors at international heritage summits. Our current solutions are fundamentally flawed. In fact, in several of the most critical cases, the very technology we've deployed to save these landmarks is creating a chemical and structural feedback loop that is making the destruction permanent. We aren't just failing to save them, we are accidentally accelerating their funeral. Let's start with the Eiffel Tower. For 130 years, Paris has relied on a simple fix: just add another coat of paint. 19 times, workers have slathered 60 tons of fresh color over the iron lattice. That kept the monument standing, right? Wrong. Underneath those heavy, suffocating layers, the original iron is corroding into dust. Engineers just discovered 884 critical structural faults hidden beneath the surface. The very paint meant to protect the tower is trapping moisture inside the joints, rotting the metal from the inside out. So why not just sandblast it all off? Because doing so exposes a massive toxic lead hazard that would shut down central Paris. They are trapped. But if you think steel is doomed, wait until you see what's happening to stone. Welcome to Venice. You've seen the spectacular Meuse floodgates. $6 billion of cutting-edge engineering designed to block the rising Adriatic Sea. And it works. It stops the catastrophic floods. But there's a fatal catch. Every time those gates rise to save the city squares, they choke the lagoon. The natural flush of the tide is completely cut off. Oxygen levels plummet, and the marshlands die. By stopping the water, we are destroying the vital sediment that actually holds the city up. The billion-dollar shield is eroding Venice's foundation from the bottom up. It's a desperate, failing gamble. Yet, even that pales in comparison to the biological collapse unfolding underwater. Down in Australia, the Great Barrier Reef is being boiled alive. Scientists are dumping millions into artificial, sun shields, and lab-grown supercorals. The grim reality? Ocean acid levels are now so high that coral skeletons are dissolving faster than they can physically grow. We aren't saving a reef anymore. We are managing a hospice. And while the oceans turn to acid, the highest peaks on Earth are facing a terrifying countdown of their own. Look at Mount Kilimanjaro. For millennia, its snow-capped peak has been a geographical constant. But those iconic glaciers aren't just melting. They are literally sublimating. They are turning directly from solid ice into invisible vapor. Why? Because massive deforestation at the mountain's base has completely shattered the local water cycle. The trees used to trap the moisture. Now, the air is bone dry. The ice is evaporating into thin air, and scientists predict the summit will be completely bald by 2030. That's just 4 years from now. But losing that ice isn't just an ugly cosmetic change. It triggers a catastrophic domino effect. Without that steady glacial meltwater, local agriculture collapses. The rivers run dry. Regional power grids, which rely entirely on hydroelectric dams, will go completely dark. The snows of Kilimanjaro aren't just a pretty postcard. They are a massive, regional life support system. Once the ice vanishes, millions are left without water. But if you think a dying mountain is terrifying, wait until you see what happens when an entire sea pulls the plug on itself. Enter the Dead Sea. The lowest point on Earth is dropping by a staggering 4 feet every single year. You've seen the photos of tourists floating effortlessly in the water. What you don't see are the massive, sudden sinkholes tearing the shoreline apart. Thousands of them. As the salt water retreats, underground fresh water rushes in, dissolving the subterranean salt layers. The ground literally hollows out and collapses without a single second of warning. Whole resorts, highways, and farms have been swallowed whole. So, what's the billion-dollar fix this time? Regional governments are building pipelines to pump in water from the Red Sea to stabilize the levels. It sounds like a massive engineering triumph. It isn't. Mixing the sulfate-rich Red Sea water with the calcium-rich Dead Sea water triggers a massive chemical reaction. It creates gypsum. The entire sea is starting to turn a milky, cloudy white. We are trying to save the Dead Sea by fundamentally mutating its chemical DNA. We are destroying a natural wonder just to artificially inflate a dying tourist trap. And while we play God with the water, the ultimate structural collapse is already locked in. Here is the brutal reality nobody wants to admit. We aren't just losing these landmarks. We are actively funding their execution. Every plane ticket, every hotel booking, every souvenir bought at the shores of the Dead Sea pours gasoline on the fire. Overtourism isn't just an annoyance. It's a physical wrecking ball. So we just shut them down, right? Cut off the tourists and let the world heal. We can't. If Venice bans the crowds entirely, the city goes bankrupt overnight. If the Great Barrier Reef tours stop, the multi-million-dollar conservation budget completely dries up. These locations are trapped in a lethal paradox. They desperately need your money to survive. But your physical presence is exactly what's killing them. And engineers are quietly preparing for the final phase. They call it the tipping point of no return. We just crossed it. We are trying to patch a sinking boat with the very wood we're tearing from its own hull. We build massive floodgates to save a city, only to suffocate the ecosystem holding it up. We paint a rotting tower, sealing the fatal moisture inside. We aren't preserving history anymore. We are building extremely expensive tombstones. And the timeline is much shorter than the politicians claim. The United Nations already ran the raw numbers. The collapse won't be a slow, romantic fade into the next century. The math points directly to a single, devastating decade. The 2030s. That is when the critical maintenance bills finally eclipse the local economies. That is the exact moment Paris has to decide if safely dismantling the Eiffel Tower is cheaper than letting it fall into the streets. That is when Venice permanently abandons its ground floors to the sea. The illusion of permanence is over. Wall Street already knows it. Look at the risk models from the world's top insurers. They have quietly stopped underwriting long-term policies for commercial properties along the Dead Sea and Venice's Grand Canals. The smart money is already packing its bags. But that triggers a terrifying new reality. If the billionaires are abandoning ship, who is left holding the bag? You are. And your tax dollars are about to be weaponized in a desperate, last-ditch global experiment. Welcome to the era of managed decline. Governments aren't trying to save these wonders anymore. They are just trying to control the optics of their death. Down in Australia, massive shadow grids of underwater drones are currently being deployed. Their actual job? To digitally scan every square inch of the Great Barrier Reef in hyper-realistic 3D before the calcium structures completely dissolve. They are secretly building a billion-dollar VR graveyard. We are literally archiving our planet because the people in charge know they can't save it. But a digital backup won't stop the real-world shockwave that's about to hit your wallet. Remember the vanishing ice of Kilimanjaro? That isn't an isolated tragedy. It's a preview. When those regional water cycles collapse, local agriculture dies, and global supply chains immediately snap. The death of these 5 landmarks isn't just about losing beautiful vacation spots. It is the ultimate trigger warning for global resource scarcity. The dominoes are already falling. And the next target? Your own backyard. The structural death spiral engineers are terrified to admit isn't a single crack in the wall or a specific chemical reaction in the water. It is the realization that we have spent a century trying to preserve the image of these wonders while ignoring the engine that keeps them alive. We treated the Eiffel Tower as a statue, forgetting it is a living organism of iron that needs to breathe. We treated the Great Barrier Reef as a postcard, forgetting it is the biological lungs of our ocean. The answer to the crisis is far more urgent than we've been led to believe because it requires us to abandon the hero architect myth and accept a brutal truth. You cannot engineer your way out of a planetary debt that has finally come due. We are standing at the threshold of the 2030s, the decade where the digital VR graveyards become our only reality unless we recognize the signal. These 5 landmarks are screaming. They are the physical manifestations of a world that is no longer willing to be a silent backdrop to our consumption. When the glaciers of Kilimanjaro evaporate and the Dead Sea hollows out, they aren't just vanishing, they are transforming into a mirror. The eternal treasures were never meant to be anchors of a static past. They were meant to be the heartbeat of a thriving, functional present. To witness them now isn't an act of tourism, it's an act of bearing witness. It is the moment we finally understand that our heritage isn't something we leave behind in a history book, it's the very ground we choose to stop breaking. The countdown isn't just for the monuments. It's for us. And for the first time in human history, we have the high-definition clarity to see exactly what we are about to lose while we still have the breath to change the ending. The structural death spiral engineers are terrified to admit isn't just a flaw in the iron or a crack in the stone. It is the ultimate realization that the age of permanence is a ghost. We have spent a century trying to preserve the image of these wonders while ignoring the engine that keeps them alive. We treated the Eiffel Tower as a statue, forgetting it is a living organism of iron that needs to breathe. We treated the Great Barrier Reef as a postcard, forgetting it is the biological lungs of our ocean. The answer to the crisis is far more urgent than we've been led to believe because it requires us to abandon the hero-architect myth and accept a brutal, yet transformative truth. You cannot engineer your way out of a planetary debt that has finally come due. We are standing at the threshold of the 2030s, the decade where the digital VR graveyards become our only reality unless we recognize the signal. These 5 landmarks are screaming. They are the physical manifestations of a world that is no longer willing to be a silent backdrop to our consumption. When the glaciers of Kilimanjaro evaporate and the Dead Sea hollows out, they aren't just vanishing, they are transforming into a mirror. The eternal treasures were never meant to be anchors of a static past. They were meant to be the heartbeat of a thriving, functional present. To witness them now isn't an act of tourism, it's an act of bearing witness. It is the moment we finally understand that our heritage isn't something we leave behind in a history book, it's the very ground we choose to stop breaking. The countdown isn't just for the monuments. It's for us. And for the first time in human history, we have the high-definition clarity to see exactly what we are about to lose while we still have the breath to change the ending. We aren't just watching the world disappear, we are deciding what is worth saving. This is the ultimate moment of clarity. We aren't just losing landmarks, we are shedding the lethal illusion that we are masters of a static world. The lesson is transformative. We cannot engineer a status quo that was never sustainable. But here is the spark. The same clarity that reveals the cracks also gives us the power to rewrite the ending. We are the first generation to truly see the gears of the planet. Now we must decide, will we be the ones who watch the wonders fade, or the ones who finally learn to live in sync with the engine of life? This isn't an ending, it's an invitation to greatness. Accepting this invitation starts with moving beyond the digital graveyard and into the heart of the solution. We are tracking the exact moment engineering shifts from blind preservation to radical evolution. To stay on the front lines of the 2030s transition and decode the systems defining our survival, join us. To see the one breakthrough actually defying the structural death spiral right now, click the video on your screen. The countdown has begun. It is time to decide what is truly worth saving.